This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Hello, 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 everybody. You are listening to the Monday Morning Break. Broadcasting live from Germany today on the 20th of January. I am your host, as always, Kanduk Kutik.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello, dear listeners. Welcome, 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 welcome. I'm glad to be here again on this Monday morning break. I was on last week and I am on this week. Little scheduling adjustment here. It's really, really good to have you with us. Let's cheer all of you who are here supporting Teachers Talk Radio. Yes, indeed. Your support is truly appreciated, and please continue supporting us by recommending us to your friends, your colleagues, anyone you think who would enjoy listening to our shows. And I'd also like to take this opportunity to mention that we at Teachers Talk Radio are looking for hosts to join our team, and I know all my other hosts, they're probably also looking for guests. So pop over to our website, www.ttradio.org, to find out more. Hosting is great fun. So get in touch with us to find out what hosting a show involves. And who knows, you could be the next host on the Monday Morning Break or the Late Late Show on any other day in the week. Now, today is a special day because today I have my almost namesake on the show. Anduk Din is our guest. So you will be listening to Kanduk and Anduk. And what are we going to be talking about? Well, we're going to be talking about writing skills and strategies. Now, almost a year ago, actually, Nigel Kaplan was a guest on my show here, and we discussed the 5-paragraph essay and why we actually, as teachers, we were doing our learners, our ESL, EFL, language arts learners, students in our language arts classroom, a disservice by, drilling the 5-paragraph essay into them. And we need to move beyond that. So this show essentially is almost like a sequel. We're going to be discussing some of the skills and strategies that we teach in the EFL writing class, why we teach them, and why we actually, or rather my guest Anduk and I, why we believe they're not exactly helpful. So Anduk, I'm trying to get you into the show, as there you are. Okay. Hi. Now Anduk, welcome to the show. Let's give you a cheer.
Thank you.
Yay! I know. I mean, it's amazing, isn't it? Oh, everybody, all so enthusiastic. The Kanduk and Anduk show. I tell you, if we do this ever again from now on, I'm going to call it the Kanduk and Anduk, or even the Anduk and Kanduk show. But moving on, Anduk. For the fun of it, can you just describe to us where you are?
Yeah, I'm currently in Hull. That is a city in England, the UK. Yeah.
Okay, and where are you sitting? Just describe your surroundings. You know that thing you do in the English language class. You get them to sit down and say, Name me five things that you can hear. So, how about you tell us three things that you can see around you?
Around me in like in England or in Vietnam.
No, literally now where you are sitting. Three things that you can see around you.
Wow, that's kind of interesting.
Yes, it's a very English language thing to do, no? We want to give people an idea of of what you see, what the atmosphere, what, where you are. Three
Yeah,
things.
three things like related to English language teaching.
No, three things literally where that you see around you. So for me, right, I see a whiteboard in front of me, I see a computer screen, and I see a pen holder made from Lego bricks that my children made for me.
Okay, I've got it. So in front of me is, of course, my laptop and my phone. There are some, some notes or some quotes on the walls that which are really motivative. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. You're at home?
Yeah, I'm at home. Yeah, say in my dorm. Yeah.
Ooh, very nice. Nice and quiet then.
Yeah.
Ooh, very good, very good. It is -2 degrees Celsius here in Germany. Tell us, I'm traveling to the UK this week. What can I expect in terms of the weather?
It's pretty cold now. Like last week, I visited a local park near my dorm.
Mm-hmm.
I saw that the lake was completely frozen. It's quite.
Ooh,
Oh yeah.
okay. Okay, clearly I'm not moving. Well, I'm not moving, but clearly I'm not traveling to somewhere that's warmer than here. Okay, I will bear that in mind. Now let's begin, Anduk. Tell us, what do you do? So two questions for you. What do you do in terms of, EFL teaching and all that, and how is that connected to your interest in teaching EFL writing?
Yeah, so I have been teaching English for over 2 years since my third year at university. Yeah, like I mainly teach English, like test preparation and English communication at some local language centers. Yeah, it in my you know in as I pursued my bachelor's degree in English language teacher education in Vietnam, I had you know 2 times of internship where I went to some local public schools to complete my internship. Yeah, as part of the program.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, oh, that's really interesting, and I think that's what partly also what we're going to talk about, isn't it? The cultural difference. So, just to clarify, so you I know that you've taught in Vietnam, and have you also taught in the UK EFL classes?
Oh no, I haven't. Like I'm trying to apply for the teaching assistant position first. Like
Oh, cool.
I intend to familiarize myself with the educational environment here first.
Mm-hmm.
Before working as a teacher in this country.
Yeah, that's interesting and definitely a conversation for a different day. But I know that we're going to touch on that briefly in our conversation later about how classrooms and settings, they're very they're cultural spaces. But we'll come to that. Let's not no spoilers here. Well, the first thing, right, that we want to tackle is the typical skills and strategies that we teach in our EFL writing classes. Could you start and then I'll add to that and then we see if we've got any common ones. So the typical ones that, any EFL teacher, when we say to them, here, go and teach this writing class, or if we talk about writing classes, we say, oh yeah, I always do that. You begin.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So there are two kinds of like environments that I mentioned earlier. The public school and language center. So when I was completing my internship terms as an undergraduate, you know things were pretty similar to my learning experiences as a student way before that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So in writing classes, like students would be introduced to various vocabulary items and some grammatical aspects that could be useful for their writing. But
Mm-hmm.
the thing is that like the students were, they did not have many opportunities to discover, develop ideas, to express themselves in the essay. Instead, they everything that they could rely on was the delivery of vocabulary and grammar and some, like samples that they
Yeah.
can read. Yeah.
Okay. So hold that thought. Hold that thought. So just when you said that, when I think back to IELTS. So, we have standardized exams. I don't know so much about other high stakes exams with other companies, but I know that, there are certain exams. And I think I remember when I was teaching on the pre-sessional, there was a lot of that. Exactly, we think we're doing the students a favor, right, by giving them these tools. The tools being, certain grammar, certain expressions, right, vocabulary, multi-word units. Like if you end your essay, this is what these are some useful phrases. So it kind of takes away, I mean, depending on who your learner is, and we'll come to that later, it kind of takes away the opportunity for our learners to investigate, to explore their creativity, because maybe the way it's being taught is being drilled, that they feel, okay, if I need to use these phrases. So that's the one thing, right? The grammar and that set, I will call it the set vocabulary and grammar that we teach in our classes, that we lay so much emphasis on. So that's one thing. Something else.
Yeah. So another thing is that, as you mentioned, IELTS and other standardized tests. I would like to shift, the focus to, my the language centers. Like it is common that, there are many textbooks with so many, fancy vocabulary items and, like samples with high scores potentially. And for example, we usually use the word important, like, plays an important role in something like that. But,
Mm-hmm.
some textbook may, compel students to use pivotal instead of important, which which may sound better than the previous one.
Yeah.
So yeah, in many, test preparation classes, the students for, attention is usually directed to using really advanced vocabulary and grammar instead of, critically thinking of their flow of ideas and, some aspects of idea development in their essays. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. So what you're saying also, so it comes back also to sampling and to modeling, right? It comes back to
Yeah.
modeling, that a lot of the time the models that are presented to learners in textbooks. I mean, it's easy. I have to say, it is definitely for me as a teacher. I teach writing as well, and I would love to have, a course book or samples that are authentic. Authentic, I think we need to distinguish authentic as in authentic samples of a particular genre,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
authentic to the learner in that cultural context and at that level. And like what you're saying, right? So you have, and it links now, what we're linking is three things. We're linking grammar, vocabulary, and modeling that may or may not be suited to the level of the student or to what the student's writing. So, like you said, the student sees the word pivotal, right,
Yeah.
um, as an important word, and they've seen it in a particular writing sample. But what I think what's lacking is that item, that lexis, hasn't been well, the student's attention is not drawn to the context of that lexis,
Yeah. You're right. Yeah.
right? Or also not just the context, not the context as in, where it appears in a text, but also to the genre, right? So let's say if we were doing, teaching students how to write a letter of complaint or an email. Nowadays we write email, an email of complaint. It is more common, we know that people would usually say, so let's say somebody's not paid their bill and you're writing to follow up on this, then we would ordinarily write, it is important or it is essential that you
Yeah.
pay this bill within 40 days of receipt of this email. And a student who's not been taught about, convention, context, um, audience, writer, and all that may think, oh, pivotal is a good word. It's a fancy word. It's a stronger word. And they might say it is pivotal that you pay this invoice in 14 days, which again is a totally incorrect use. Or, okay, no, I scrap that. It's not an incorrect use, but it's not, it's not
Authentic.
appropriate in that context. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so modeling, so that's another thing, isn't it? It's what we do a lot in our classes is we present models, and we kind of, some of us say to our students, hey guys, these are models, these are good models to follow, um, without any extra additional information
Yeah,
to
that's right.
it. Yeah.
So is that, the awareness of, a context appropriacy and so on, you know,
Mm-hmm.
represents the knowledge of pragmatics, which is sometimes completely absent in many writing lessons. As you mentioned earlier, it is pretty like usually the case that we may show samples and some you know unusual vocabulary items along with some really advanced um, grammatical points without letting our students discover you know the context where we should use it, or email or academic writing, and or just
Mm-hmm.
formal letters. And
Yeah, I remember this is something, and here's a shout out to my sponsored show last week with Andrew Jennings and his book with Bloomsbury Publishing. Granted, it's not necessarily for ESL and EFL, but it's language arts and it's for writing in compulsory schooling in the ages from primary school up to high school slash secondary school. One of the strategies that I saw in that book was we have the modeling, right? So there's a model there. There were different genres. So it was very much a genre approach, and there were the models and what happens in the lesson. So it's essentially a teacher resource book, and if you were teaching writing for the first time, you could actually use it as is, almost as is. You just have to make sure that the content is suitable to your level. But the pedagogical the strategy was, here's a model, and then there's the investigation of the model. So the teacher would ask the students, the learners, right, so this is a set of instructions. Now look and see, this is how we would list the steps chronologically, and there'll be attention drawn to specific vocabulary, specific grammar structures, and things like that. And in Andrew's book, in this strategy, they really do place, or rather, attention is placed on taking the time to explore and investigate the model and to learn from the model. And I think in the EFL classroom, many many teachers are very often, we're so pressed for time that we just say, oh, here's the model in the textbook, look at it, and then now we skip straight to the practice. Do you find that to be the case? So what you're saying is, yeah, we're not looking at pragmatics, we're not looking at the pragmalinguistic features of the text.
yeah, that's right. There's you know pragmatics along with social linguistics, you know, are really crucial for delivering sound lessons in EFL and ESL classrooms. Like as you said earlier, you know, if we just show models without further like drawing attention students' attention to pragmatic, features of such, you know, content. Of course, students may instinctively, um, choose that they really want to get. Like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
I find these words really interesting, but others pretty hard. I just, get it for myself. But the thing is, we teachers may not know about that. How can we check the input while we just, show the models without any explanation? That's
Mm-hmm.
dangerous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's what Andrew Jennings said in our show last week. He said, well, he didn't literally say that, show them the model and not explain, but he did highlight that it is important that model has to actually be modeling, as an action. So you actually investigate the genre with your learners. I That's also something that somebody else, so Nigel Kaplan from my show last year, that's actually also something that he said, and I used that strategy. I learned that through some of Nigel's work, that what I do with my students is, and it's hard work. I think you know that yourself. If you want to get culturally appropriate, culturally authentic models, samples of text for your students, it's very, very difficult, right, to get them at a suitable level. And then you have to work your way through it as well. Last week, I did resumes with my university students, with my writing class. And in preparation, I had asked them to bring a copy of their own resume. And I hadn't told them, I hadn't pointed them to any website or anything. I say, just bring a copy of your own resume. And then in class, what we did was, because I wanted to create an authentic writing situation. I think that's another thing. One of the pitfalls, or one thing that happens in our EFL, ESL classes, is that the writing situations that we present students with aren't always authentic. So I wanted to present them with an authentic writing situation. So I had them go to a website. In Germany, there's a program where German students at German universities can go to different countries as language assistants. And to apply for such a position, so there are fixed, application dates and things like that, they need various documents, one of which is a letter of motivation and a resume. So we talked about that. So first of all, what I did was I established a context for them.
Mm-hmm.
And then we looked at the resume and the requirements. So I said to them, I said, well, you can't just write a resume like that. You need to make sure, and you and I, we know that, you need to make sure that your cover letter or your application letter and your resume fits what, the hiring agency or the institution is looking for. So I made them explore the website a little. I made them look and list, what characteristics um, a successful candidate would have. I asked them to list down what are some of the things that the hiring agency was looking for. And then somebody said, well, I've got my CV here in German, so they have to submit a resume both in English and in German. So the student said, well, I have my resume here in German. I could just translate it, couldn't I? Translate it to English. And I said to them, well, I mean, think about it. I think the hiring agency wants to see whether, not just whether you can produce the document in English, but wants to see if you're familiar with the conventions, right? And the language of resumes in English, because they're different from in German. And, my students didn't think about that. So that's the other thing. I think the issue with modeling is when we model, just say, here's a CV, go and do it yourself. Because, like you said, students might pick out certain things that they feel they like, oh, that's a good phrase. I'll keep that and use that all the time. Or in the case of my students, they might say, well, I've done it in German and this genre, I can just translate all the words. They think, the convention for that genre is the same, both in English and in German. Yeah, so I've talked too much now. What's another skill and strategy that we always teach in the classroom?
Um, Let me see. But as we are talking about something that related to culture, so can we talk about that a little bit because it's deeply related to the context in Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
So
go ahead. Go ahead.
yes, thank you. Yeah. So the the really pressing issue in our classroom is the word by word translation. Like, last week I interviewed one of my previous students you know, for my professional development document, and, you know, he would insist on translating everything in his head, translating what he was thinking in Vietnamese before he producing something in English. And that is pretty, like dangerous when it comes to writing because the cultural impact underlying writing expressions between Vietnamese and English is not widely recognized, I guess so, because in Vietnam at at the primary level we study Vietnamese literature first before dealing with foreign languages. The thing is that in the in the former subjects we are often encouraged to start writing indirectly. It is some kind of non-linear writing style because it is the way that we can attract readers, arousing their curiosity to read our essays in Vietnamese. But that kind of writing style and convention are not really common in English. In English, and everything has to be clear cut and follows a linear, order.
Yeah, yeah. I know what you mean. I know what you mean. Yes, that is that's the same. That's the same in German as well. I mean, I have had students. I've had my German students. So German L1 students or students who've gone through the education system in Germany and have learned, developed their literacy first in German, in the German language. I've had students like that say to me, or they're just baffled when I introduce them to English language academic writing or prose, and I say, well, this is how we do it. It's you're direct, you're straight to the point.
Yes,
A word I use a lot in my feedback when I give them feedback is waffling. I say, don't waffle. And they have told me that apparently, now I don't know how true that is, and maybe they have totally misunderstood their own teachers and their own learning, but for them, they say that in German or Germany, I don't know if there's any research, right? But um, the more unclear your writing is, the more long-winded it is, the smarter you look. And I always say to them, no, 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 don't do that in English. Don't beat about the bush, right? And I do get emails like that when I've taught them how to write emails, and I do get emails like that, where they're telling me 16 different things before they actually get down to the request. And last week for one of my modules, I was talking to them about deadlines, and I was saying, if you can't meet the deadline, send me an email. And I actually had to say to them, I want only two things in the email. I don't need to know why you cannot meet your deadline. It is irrelevant to me. It's that's private to you. I don't need to know anything. I just need you in your email to tell me what class you're in, because I have 8 different groups. I need
hmm
to know what class you're in, and I need you to suggest to me a new deadline with which you feel you can submit your assignment. And this deadline, you need to think about it. It's got to be reasonable to your peers, or fair to your peers and reasonable to me. And and a lot of my students are quite shocked when I say, well, I don't need your life story about why you can't make it. I have the same thing when students write to me to say that they're not going to be in class. I get emails about 6 sentences long telling me about how far away they live and how much snow they've got and their car's not starting and how long. And I really don't. I mean, I think sometimes they think I'm disinterested, but I'm not. It's just a cultural thing, right? We'll come back to culture though. I mean, what other strategies do we teach them? So we've got the vocabulary, we've got the grammar, the set vocabulary and grammar, or rather what they think is the set vocabulary and grammar. And then we've got the modeling that we do with them, or rather we don't do the modeling. We show them the model and we don't do very much with it. We skip straight to the writing. I have students who very happily would take set phrases from the model and use it, and then it's just totally wrong. And then what you're saying also is that we're teaching them, this Anglo-centric style of writing,
Yeah.
which is direct and to the point, um, which is counter to what they've learned in school. So they struggle with that. And then we see it as our biggest struggle. I think I think they struggle with that, um, because they're not necessarily open-minded, or it's their misconception that writing everywhere is the same,
Yeah, you're right.
right? What else do we teach them?
Well, in terms of writing, let me say, like, there are, literally some exercises if we teach some, you know, students with beginning or intermediate levels. There are some exercises such as sentence construction
Yeah.
or gap fill, questions. Yeah, and then they just complete them.
Mm-hmm.
They're quite controlled, but the thing is that we could barely enable them to make full use of such exercises in their writing.
Exactly. That's another thing. Yeah, the practice that we give them, right? The practice that we give them is very, very controlled. I noticed that as well. I mean, so what we have is I have one, like you said, with the sentence structure. So I mean, when you have two simple sentences and you get them, to use conjunctions to then create
Right.
compound or complex sentences, and they will happily I have to say they will happily sit there and do it, right? One A4 sheet with all these, sentence transformation exercises. They'll happily do it, but it doesn't translate. You don't see it in their independent writing,
Independence, yeah.
right? And what I find also with some of my students, because of how, well, in the past, because of how their marking their work would be marked, that for they would lose points. So
Mm.
in their essay writing exam, they would lose points for grammatical and vocabulary mistakes, so mistakes at a linguistic level. So what they ended up doing, despite weeks and weeks of controlled practice, like you say, of controlled practice in sentence structure, what they end up doing in their essay, so as not to lose points, is to
Mm.
write a whole bunch of simple sentences,
Oh,
right? Yeah, and then you get an essay with a very high score, right? Because there's no
yeah.
they don't there's no I describe it as there's no chance for them to make any mistake in their writings, because they're using the structures they know, but not the structures that we had practiced. And like you also said, yeah, they do all these exercises, but it doesn't translate. You don't see it in their independent writing.
Yeah, you're
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
And
That's
reflecting upon my experiences, I also say that, in order to successfully and independently use such complex items, it requires like potentially years of practice. consistent practice.
Oh, definitely. I mean, it's not. I think I absolutely, that is something I absolutely agree with you. I think that is one. I think that for me there are two myths of academic writing or writing in English as a foreign or writing in general. I think there are two myths. The first is that you can teach it in one semester, right? All the
Yeah.
skills you would ever need, that you can actually teach it, and that any learner who goes to such a course at the end of the semester or at the end of the course, they will have all the writing skills and strategies that they need. That's the one myth. And the second myth, I think, about writing or teaching writing is that you can teach writing on its own. But I find personally that for writing to be successful, or for writing instruction to be successful, and I mean, there may be people who may disagree with me, I think we need to teach writing and reading together, because the modeling, right? The modeling is the reading. The modeling will be your reading element, that they have to read, that they have to investigate, that they have to talk about word choices. They have to talk about the linguistic choices that the authors made. They need to think about, how successful that piece of writing is. That's the reading aspect, and then they can develop that independence, I think. I mean, but that's just me. I think
No,
what
I can
Go
agree
ahead.
more. That's the case. Yeah.
But I mean, I think because, like you say, we have it in Germany in public schools, and you've got your experience from the language schools as well. I think a lot of how teachers teach has to do with the end goal, isn't it? The end goal of the language course. So you know, it's a very short-term goal, teaching them to complete, to pass that standardized essay,
Mm.
I think, and that's where the flaw is. But let's let that rest, and we're going to hear some messages from the lovely people who sponsor us, and then we're going to hear some education news before we continue to talk a little bit more about culture and the writing classroom, and then some of the skills and strategies that we think our learners should unlearn.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Meet USA Study, your one-stop platform for guiding students through their college application journey. Access up-to-date resources on universities, programs, scholarships, and application requirements, all in one place. Get easy-to-access tools, personalised timelines, expert tips, application templates, and exclusive webinars with admissions officers to help your student stand out. Visit usastudy.co.uk or call Phil at 0800 612 8271, because every student deserves the opportunity to shine with USA Study.
Hey education changemakers, ready for something special? Your Spec Show's 40th anniversary, and we're throwing a free celebration just for you. Join us at London Excel from January 22nd to 24th to connect, learn and be inspired. Picture this, 300 plus speakers who truly get it, 600 cutting-edge edtech companies, and all the fresh ideas you need to make 2025 your best year yet. So why wait? Head to uk.betshow.com, grab your free ticket and come celebrate with your peers. Because this is for you. See you at Bet.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
Schools Week covered a story about a software glitch which wiped Ofsted inspectors' evidence during almost 200 inspections over a 3-year period. The glitch only resulted in revisits on 4 occasions. The report, shared with Schools Week by Ofsted themselves, found that of 26,431 inspections conducted using electronic evidence gathering between February 2021 and May 2024, there were 191 where inspectors reported evidence was lost. Whilst Ofsted say that 4 incidents resulted in inspectors returning to gather extra evidence, it was confident that the judgment is secure in the other 187 cases. Ofsted has refused to name the establishments affected. The electronic system replaced pen and paper in 2019, as the inspectorate said it would better review and synthesise notes and improve security. Schools Week revealed last year that the system was presenting issues, and Chief Inspector Sir Martin Oliver commissioned a rapid review. Ofsted policy states that where the electronic system fails to record and save evidence, inspectors should recapture the salient points from memory as soon as possible after they detect that any notes are missing. The review found that in 182 of the 191 cases, the inspectors affected had followed this policy. In the 5 cases where this was not done, other notes recorded by the inspector or colleagues in the inspection team supported the judgment. Critics, however, have told Schools Week that this isn't good enough. The watchdog has since confirmed it is in the process of moving the electronic system to a new version, which offers improved offline capability and is expected to perform well with intermittent and low connectivity. The BBC covers plans by government to reintroduce a piece of legislation aimed at protecting free speech on university campuses. The Higher Education Freedom of Speech Act, which proposed fines for universities failing to uphold freedom of speech, was passed in 2023. Its implementation was stopped after Labour's election in the summer. This was due to concerns that the law was potentially damaging to student welfare. Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson told Parliament that the government would be progressing with the legislation, but with significant changes. Phillipson said academic freedom was much more important than the wishes of some students not to be offended. However, the government says it will seek to remove the part of the Act that allows people to sue universities that fail to uphold their duty to protect freedom of speech. The National Union of Students welcomed the announcement, saying the threat of complex legal responsibilities was no longer hanging over them. Further comments can be found on the BBC website. The Guardian features a story about curriculum changes proposed in Italy. Bible reading, Latin learning, and learning poetry off by heart could all return to primary and middle schools as part of a revamp, but this has been criticised as retrograde and nostalgic. Education Minister Giuseppe Valditara gave an interview to an Italian newspaper, Il Giornale, saying that children must discover a love of reading and learn to write better. Another member of the Education Department told a news agency that Christianity's sacred text would be present in some form. According to reports in the Italian press, reading lists could also include books by a variety of 19th and 20th century Italian poets and writers, although space would be made for other writers from across the globe. Political opponents have criticised the proposals as supporting right-wing ideology and confusing authoritarianism with authority. Students have also protested against the proposals, calling them repressive. Finally, pupils at a school in Solihull are being offered the chance to not have homework for 2 weeks, but only if they use their smartphones less and read a book instead. The BBC Radio West Midlands newsfeed says that staff at an independent primary and secondary school have welcomed the scheme aimed to help pupils start the new year with less screen time. Pupils said they were enjoying the change, whilst the head teacher hoped the initiative was about bringing balance between screen time and homework. This has been Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
I think that's really, really interesting what Joe Fox shared about mobile phone use with primary school and students having a 2-week reprieve from homework, right? If they use their mobile, I think she said if they use their mobile phones less. I think it's really interesting because my son's in primary school, and very, very few kids in his school have mobile phones. Mobile phones are not allowed in primary school here in Germany, so I think we don't have to deal with that problem. But anyway, we are on the Monday morning break. We have the winning combination, Anduk and Kanduk. I'm just so tickled by that. Anduk and Kanduk are talking about writing skills and strategies. And before the news, we shared some of the things that we always teach in EFL writing classes. So there's always, that set vocabulary, multi-word units, the set grammar. There's always the modeling. And we're going to be a bit precise here. There's always the modeling, the model or the sample text that is presented to our learners, but not dealt with in depth, not explored, not investigated. We talked about also the cultural challenge of bringing the Anglo-centric writing conventions into a culture where they're a little bit different with how they express themselves, in writing. We talked about that. I wanted to throw in one more thing as well that we do very often in EFL, ESL classrooms, is to present writing as something that's really strictly linear in the sense that, well, first of all, many places still do teach the 5-paragraph essay. So whatever, as I remember, as Nigel Kaplan said in my show a year ago, he said, we give our learners the impression that anything we want to say can be said with an introduction, 3 body paragraphs, and a conclusion. And then, that's something that we do a lot. Anduk mentioned also that writing is a skill that you develop over time. It's not something that you can develop, that you can master, in one course or one semester. Anduk, shall we talk about the strategies and skills that we would like our learners to unlearn? Yes, no, maybe?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, what's the first thing you would like them to unlearn?
So basically, um, it comes down with the way that we view writing first. We usually think of writing as a process where we receive input and then we produce what we have learned before. But
Mm-hmm.
that is not false. But the thing is that we need to look deeper at the process at the individual level. When reflecting upon our learning experiences, we can say that like whenever we start writing something, even simple sentences, we are really afraid. You know, like there is some sort of fear within us
Mm-hmm.
when we try to write something. We are afraid of making mistakes. We are afraid of losing self-image and so on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's go back to the insights that we mentioned earlier. That is, the modeling and the delivery of content. When students are instructed to use such items, they subconsciously they think that what is important in their essay says the ability to perform lexically and
Mm-hmm.
grammatically well, but they subconsciously ignore expressions of ideas and communication with readers.
Right. So the voice, right? The
The
voice.
voice, yeah, that's
The
the voice.
voice. Yeah, yeah. I remember, sorry to interrupt. I remember that years and years ago, when I was teaching on a foundation program at a British university, one of the subject teachers, so a friend of mine, she was a subject teacher in a different department, and she actually commented to me that a lot of the writing, so the final term papers, the essays that she received from EFL, ESL students who had been through our program, she said their writing is very static, is very fake. It all sounds the same, right? And there's no voice.
Yeah,
Their
no.
voice is not there, right? Because they're using, a lot of them are using, and I can understand learners who feel, who have the mentality, well, just give me the language, give me the vocabulary, give me the phrases, give me all the things I need to build. For them, it's like we're giving them the tools to build their essay together, and it's not got their voice, the little nuances, right? When you say, for example, this study shows, or this study might show, or maybe this study suggests
Mm,
that, no, 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 right?
mm,
They don't have that because they're working from a script, I
yeah,
think. And what you're saying is one thing, that going beyond the writing classroom, one thing our learners should do is to learn to let go of the script.
yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, in order to, yeah, in order for the students to let go of such kind of, goals, we need to reflect upon their fear because they are afraid of losing their self-image because they are not, some kind of an expert in
Mm,
vocabulary and grammar. Instead, yeah, what I suggest, we should do instead is direct, the learner's attention to, as I mentioned earlier, reader awareness. That is
yeah.
the awareness of whether or not readers can understand what we truly say and connect to us intimately.
Mm. Exactly. I totally agree. Yeah, that's one thing also that I had read somewhere else, that we need to, I'd read it somewhere else in a different book on writing that I'd been reading. And this is what I always tell my own students. I say, ask yourself, who is your audience? Who are you writing for? Because, you could, let's say, you're sharing your research proposal. Let's say you had to write a research proposal, and you're sharing this proposal with a friend in an email. Now, you would write that differently than you would with a teacher who you are close to, who says, hey, I'm really interested in hearing what you're going to do for your thesis. Can you share your ideas with me? Again, right?
Mm,
Same topic, but two different audience. And at the same time, you have maybe a third audience when you're putting in your formal proposal. Again, that's a different audience. So you may have the same topic, you have different genres, and different genres have, use, you have different pragma-linguistic features. And I think, um tell me what you think of this idea. I think that we should encourage, in order to unlearn, right, these, what they've learned through that whole, vocab, grammar, modeling, looking at pragma-linguistic features, and then developing for themselves a script where they think this is my key to good academic writing. I think what we should do is encourage them to read more and to highlight for themselves, right, expressions that they think, oh, that's a good way of saying this. I think this is something I could use if I was writing similar. So to encourage them more, to make reading a much bigger part of writing instruction. What are your thoughts on this?
yeah, certainly, reading is, like, really, really important. By the time we can write something with our own voice,
Mm,
it requires some sort of critical thinking.
yeah.
Like we we need to cultivate students' ability to assess whether or not what they read it's truly connected to their writing styles and expressions of personal identity in their writing
Mm.
style while adhering to formal convention in their work.
Yeah. I think another thing that I do, and it's something where I'm trying to get students also to unlearn. So, I like the word that you've used, or the phrase, writing skills and strategies to unlearn, where they think that they're coming into this particular writing class to learn skills and strategies. But what I'm actually trying to do with them, I love the word you use, cultivate. I'm trying to cultivate good writing habits. I'm trying to cultivate in them an understanding of what writing entails. So in my classes, instead of getting them, to write, or giving them a topic, and then here's your model, and this is what we're going to do, and here we go, this is your introduction and your thesis statement, is for the first 2 weeks, and every time we do modeling, well, not the first 2 weeks, but essentially in the first week, I ask them to kind of think about all the different genres of writing that they do in their first language and in their second language. And then I get them to answer the question, what makes some pieces of writing successful, and
Mm,
what makes some pieces of writing unsuccessful?
mm,
Because when you think of it, it's like what you had said earlier, it's about the audience, isn't it? I
yeah,
mean, we just teach them. I think one thing that we teach is just, it's just one way, really. It's like, here, do this piece of writing, this is what you need, here are the pragma-linguistic features. But we don't get them to think about, what do I want to say, and have I been successful in what I wanted to say?
yeah. That is the reader awareness, and yeah, that is a really interesting activity. Um, what I have been doing now, there is an activity about some kind of cultural comparison in writing.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can show them two kinds of paragraph for the same like general idea. One
Mm-hmm.
is non-linear linear style, which is really familiar to the Vietnamese culture,
Yeah.
and the other one is of course linear. That is what we expect, in our test preparation classes, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I have students discuss and evaluate the differences between the two essays. After that, of course, they can identify the differences in the flows of ideas and so on. But of course, it has the same general idea. Later on, I show them the Vietnamese version of the two paragraphs.
Mm-hmm.
Surprisingly, they find that the Vietnamese non-linear paragraph is really easy to understand because it is familiar to their own identity of who they are.
Right.
Yeah, but the the Vietnamese linear writing style, could be really strange, peculiar to them. So
Yeah.
that is the kind of critical thinking that I want to cultivate in my students. They do not necessarily abandon their you know their like
The
cultural.
knowledge, their own background knowledge.
Yeah, that's right, that's right. But they
Yeah.
need to be to enhance their cultural sensitivity as they write. Even if it's not the same.
Yeah, and also what you're saying, right? And it's that knowledge of conventions. I think that's the thing. I think many young people who go through a particular school system, um, having been, how would you say, having been instructed for so long in a particular style of writing, and they've developed all these certain conventions. It's not that they're not clever, but they don't realize it's not been made they aware to them that different cultures will have different writing conventions, and this is where I like what you said, where you have the two comparisons. Actually, I think I might actually do that in class sometimes. Well, not sometime, but the next time I have my writing class, I remember And I think when you do that, actually, you make them aware better. It's there's a difference to saying, okay, in English we do it like this, right? Because they don't always, the differences don't always are not always so obvious first. If you just say, okay, here's how this is done, and look,
that's
this
right.
is how it's done in English. But then when you put it as a comparison, right, then it's more evident to them. I did have in just to share, I did have in my writing class last semester, I was doing quoting, right? Incorporating your sources. So direct quote, indirect quote, paraphrase, summary. And I had a student in the class who was working as a student assistant for a professor in the German department. So she did a lot of editing and proofreading work for him. And there was a lot of, I think he had a journal that he was an editor of. So she did the copy editing and things like that. So she knew quite a bit about German academic writing conventions. And in the class, when I was teaching, I said one thing, and this is, and I said it kind of like as part and parcel of the lesson. I said, so, guys, so one thing you need to be aware is that in German, the norm is direct quotation, and apparently the more direct quotations, the stronger your paper is. However, in English academic writing, the convention is to paraphrase and summarize, and especially, at university level, when you do that, you demonstrate your understanding of the text, right, of the original source. So we know that. And my students just nodded, yeah. And actually, this girl, she was sitting opposite another student, and he actually asked her, he said, oh, is it true? Because he knew about her part-time work. And she told him, and she shared with him that it is really, really different, and she can see the difference. And she was then more sensitive, to what I was teaching. So I think one thing about writing skills and strategies, well, another thing we need to unlearn, or our students need to unlearn, is that this whole, one size fits all, and here's our script.
Yeah.
Anything else that we want to cover? Let's think about that before we wrap it up.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Meet USA Study, your one-stop platform for guiding students through their college application journey. Access up-to-date resources on universities, programs, scholarships, and application requirements, all in one place. Get easy-to-access tools, personalised timelines, expert tips, application templates, and exclusive webinars with admissions officers to help your student stand out. Visit usastudy.co.uk or call Phil at 0800 612 8271 because every student deserves the opportunity to shine with USA Study.
Hey education changemakers, ready for something special? It's Bet Show's 40th anniversary and we're throwing a free celebration just for you. Join us at London Excel from January 22nd to 24th to connect, learn and be inspired. Picture this, 300 plus speakers who truly get it, 600 cutting-edge edtech companies, and all the fresh ideas you need to make 2025 your best year yet. So why wait? Head to uk.betshow.com, grab your free ticket and come celebrate with your peers. Because this is for you. See you at Bet.
Yes, see you at Bet. Teachers Talk Radio is at stand SS52. Come and look for us. So, Anduk, talking about unlearning as we head into the last couple of minutes here, I have a question for you. What would you say to a student who says, well, so I've done the course and I don't really worry too much about all that other advice that you're telling me, read more, and I should be more critical and look to see how, the conventions in English are different from my first language, I can use generative AI to help me with my writing. What do you say?
Well, before we talk about AI, this is what usually I what I usually do in the classroom. Like they need to have some kind of the ability to notice something in their writing skills. Yeah, like this insight I got I got from a book called Writing in Tesla in
Mm-hmm.
their settings. Yeah, that book really changed my life and the way I teach writing as well. Like as I mentioned earlier, the, the there is the activity of cultural comparison in writing that I would do, and then
Yeah.
that's the way that I draw student attention. It is important for them to notice something unfamiliar and something different in writing, and then I would provide them with some tools that they could rely on to develop further. That's the same is for AI. So I was I was trying to know about how they use AI, like whether or not they use AI to paraphrase a whole essay or give them some lexical items and so on, or they use AI you know to talk about to share some ideas about their writing, not just an examiner, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it all comes down to noticing.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, and we've come full circle, I suppose, with what I'm saying about the myth, the myths in teaching writing, that you can teach it in 15 weeks, in a 15-week semester,
Yeah.
and you can teach it alone. You, like I said, the more you read, you tend to notice things. I also tell my students with AI, I mean, I have a lot of students who will happily write an email to me in German and either put it through a translator, right? Or they put in a prompt, and I get the email. And as a teacher, you can tell because they're so generic emails. The best ones are from, like, if students write, if there are 3 or 2 students who write to me, and they don't realize that it flags up when I get 3 emails back to back within seconds of each other, and each email text is 100% the same to the other one. That's one thing. But I say to them, you can use it if you want, but ask yourself, has it helped you in any way? Has it helped you develop your language skills?
Yeah.
Because I do use a translator when I write emails in German, and I look at it before I send it, and I kind of pick up phrases, and I go, oh, okay, that's a good way to say that. I might, put that in my little notebook. But I don't think many students do. For them, at the end of the day, it's just fulfilling that task, isn't it? Fulfilling that task. I've done it now. I've been helped, and I don't need to think about it. And the only thing I can say about such behavior is boo. That's the only thing. That's just awful, awful behavior.
Mm.
Um, Other thoughts before we close?
Mm, yeah, so that's all, but I just want to say that, like, writing is not just about language, and not just about language as a product. It is
Mm.
about culture and identity, like
Oh, yeah.
the community we live in and who we are at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think maybe that's an important thing to unlearn, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
in our writing classes, we actually, especially those that are headed towards, standardized exams, we mislead our learners by thinking that writing is just a product, and it's a product at the end that matters, and we can put this product together just like we would make a spaghetti bolognese for lunch. I'm just saying that because it's lunchtime, right? So all you need for your meal is spaghetti, tomato sauce, and your minced meat. You put that together and you've got your meal. So our students think, I've got my vocab, I've got my grammar, I've got one model. I'll just put all that together, build it together, and yippee, that's my finished product. But they don't realize that it's much more than that. It's, asking ourselves, who am I as a writer? What do I want to achieve? What would make this piece of writing successful? So many other factors as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's lunchtime, isn't it? It is lunchtime. Well, well, everybody, we have now come to the end of our hour. Anduk, it has been a pleasure having you on the show. Again, I can only reiterate, I think we should have called it today's show, Anduk and Kanduk. Needless to say, thank you so much for your time. So gracious with your time, your insights. I know how busy you are, so thank you very, very much.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. See, there you go. And whoa, all that cheering for you. See, very, very happy to have you.
Thank you. I truly appreciate it.
Yeah, and our dear listeners, we have many amazing shows this week. And you know what? Teachers Talk Radio is at BET UK. Anduk, if you're in London, I think you can attend BET UK for free. It's an educational technology show at the XL. We, Teachers Talk Radio, are going to be there. So as always, don't forget to like and subscribe and keep in touch with us. Anduk, maybe I'll see you at BET UK. That is all for our show today.
We're looking forward to seeing you in the UK.
Yep. See you soon.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.